The woman who died 100 years ago still walks the streets at night. The first time I saw her, I thought she was just another villager coming home late. Her white dress seemed to glow under the moonlight as she walked barefoot along the dusty road. But then she turned and looked at me, and I saw that her eyes had no color at all, just empty white orbs that seemed to pierce through my soul. This is not a made-up story. This is not something I heard from my grandmother or read in a book. This is something that happened to me and too many others in our village. And if you don't believe me now, you will by the time I finish telling you what happened when the woman who died a century ago decided to visit us again. The woman in white, my name is Adisa. I live in the small village of Mabira, which sits at the edge of an ancient forest in Uganda. Our village has existed for hundreds of years, and with it, so have our stories. But there is one story that isn't just told around fires to scare children. It's a story that continues to unfold, even today. In 1923, a woman named Nakato lived in our village. She was beautiful and kind, a healer who knew the secrets of plants and spirits. People came from far away to seek her remedies. But there were those who feared her power, who whispered that her knowledge came not from study, but from dark pacts with forest spirits. One night, during a terrible storm, Nakato's hut was struck by lightning and burst into flames. The villagers, caught between fear and duty, hesitated too long before trying to save her. By morning, all that remained were ashes and charred bones. They buried her at the crossroads, as was the custom for those suspected of witchcraft, to prevent their spirits from finding their way back to the village. They placed heavy stones on her grave and carved protective symbols into them. For years afterward, no one spoke her name. The village pretended she had never existed until she began to appear again. The first sighting, my grandfather was the first to see her 50 years after her death. He was coming home late from visiting a neighboring village when he saw a woman in a white dress walking along the road ahead of him. Thinking it was someone from our village, he called out a greeting. When she turned around, he told me her face was beautiful, but wrong somehow. Her eyes were completely white, with no iris or pupil, and her feet, they didn't quite touch the ground. My grandfather ran all the way home and didn't leave his hut for 3 days. When he finally emerged, he went straight to the village elder and told his story. The elder listened carefully, then ordered a sacrifice to be made at the crossroads where Nakato was buried. For a while, there were no more sightings. People began to relax. They said my grandfather had drunk too much palm wine that night, or that he'd been frightened by an owl or some other night creature. Then the children started seeing her too. The children's whispers. It began with my cousin Tendo, who was only 6 at the time. He woke up screaming one night, saying a woman in white had been standing at the foot of his sleeping mat, watching him. She was crying, he said. Her tears were like silver, and where they fell on the ground, little white flowers grew. We thought it was just a nightmare until other children began to have the same dream. Always the same white-eyed woman, always crying silver tears that turned into flowers. But the strangest thing was that small white flowers began appearing in the village. Overnight flowers that had never grown there before. Our parents forbade us from picking these flowers or even touching them. When the village elders tried to dig them up, the flowers would be back the next morning, twice as many as before. The warning things escalated when Buona Mutisa, the richest man in our village, decided to build a new house on the land near the crossroads where Nakato was buried. The elders warned him against it, but he laughed at their superstitions. He had been educated in the city and no longer believed in the old ways. This is prime land, he said, and I won't let some centuries-old ghost story keep me from using it. The day after construction began, all 5 workers fell mysteriously ill. They complained of feeling cold, even in the midday sun, and of hearing a woman's voice whispering in their ears, even when they were alone. Buona Mutisa hired new workers from another village men who hadn't heard the stories. But the same thing happened to them. One man claimed he saw a woman in white standing among the foundation stones, shaking her head slowly. Still, Buona Mutisa persisted. "I will build this house," he declared at a village meeting, "and I will live in it. And I will prove to all of you that there is no such thing as ghosts." That night, every hut in the village was awakened by a terrible scream. We all rushed outside to find Buona Mutisa standing in the center of the village, his eyes wide with terror. "She came to me," he whispered. "She stood beside my bed and told me that the land is hers and that I must not disturb her rest. She said," he swallowed hard. "She said if I continue, she will take someone I love in exchange for the peace I have stolen from her." The next day, construction on the new house stopped. Buona Mutisa ordered the foundation stones to be removed and the land to be returned to its natural state. He even planted fruit trees around the crossroads as an offering of peace. We thought that would be the end of it. We were wrong. The return. 3 months ago, on the 100th anniversary of Nakato's death, strange things began to happen in our village. The white flowers returned, sprouting not just near the crossroads, but everywhere between the stones of cooking hearts, in water jugs, even pushing up through the dirt floors of our homes. Then people began to see her again, not just at night on the lonely roads, but in broad daylight, standing at the edge of the forest or beside the village well, always watching, always with those empty white eyes and that sad expression. Children would wake up with small gifts beside their sleeping mats, intricately woven grass bracelets, or smooth stones with natural holes in them, the kind that traditional healers use to see into the spirit world. Old Nantongo, our village's medicine woman, said that Nakato was not trying to frighten us. "She is trying to remind us," she said. 100 years have passed, and she wants us to remember what was done to her. But not everyone agreed with old Nantongo's interpretation. Some feared that Nakato had returned for revenge, that she would punish the descendants of those who had let her burn. The night of no moon last week, on the night when the moon disappeared completely from the sky, I couldn't sleep. A strange restlessness had taken hold of me, and I found myself walking toward the crossroads where Nakato was buried. I don't know what drew me there. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps something else was guiding my steps. As I approached, I saw her, the woman in white, standing beside the largest stone that marked her grave. Fear froze me in place. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The woman Nakato turned her white eyes toward me and smiled. It wasn't a threatening smile, but sad and somehow knowing. "You are not afraid," she said. Her voice sounded like leaves rustling and water flowing at the same time. "That is good. I have been waiting for someone who would not run from me. What do you want?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Justice," she replied. "Truth, not revenge, as some believe. I want my story to be told correctly." She told me then what really happened that night 100 years ago. How it wasn't an accident that her hut caught fire. How certain villagers, jealous of her healing abilities and afraid of her power, had set the blaze themselves and prevented others from helping her. "They buried me as a witch," she said, "when all I ever did was try to heal the sick and help the suffering." As she spoke, I felt a deep sadness wash over me. Not my own emotion, but hers, a century of sorrow and loneliness and injustice. "Why have you returned now?" I asked. "Because after 100 years, the veil between the living and the dead grows thin. I can cross over more easily now. And because the descendants of those who wronged me must acknowledge what was done, so that my spirit can finally rest." The unveiling the next day, I went to old Nantongo and told her everything. She nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. "Nakato has chosen you as her voice," she said. "You must speak for her at the village gathering tomorrow." I was terrified. How would the villagers react? Some of the oldest and most respected families in Mabira were descendants of those who had wronged Nakato. Would they turn against me for revealing their ancestors' crimes? But that night, I dreamed of Nakato. In my dream, she didn't have white eyes, but warm brown ones, filled with kindness and wisdom. She placed her hand on my heart and said, "Truth brings healing, not just for the dead, but for the living too." When I woke, I found a small pouch beside my sleeping mat, filled with herbs that smelled of sunlight and forest shadows. I knew then that I had to speak, whatever the consequences. The reckoning, the village gathering was tense. Everyone had seen the white flowers, had heard about the sightings. Many had experienced their own encounters with the woman in white. Fear hung in the air like smoke. When I stood to speak, a hush fell over the crowd. I told them everything Nakato's true story, the deliberate fire, the false accusation of witchcraft, the century of restless wandering. As I spoke, a cool wind began to blow, though the day was hot and still. The white flowers that had sprouted throughout the village released their petals, which swirled around us like snow. Some of the elders tried to shout me down. "These are lies," they cried. "Disrespect to our ancestors." But then old Nantongo stood beside me. "I have consulted the spirits," she said, her voice carrying surprising strength for one so old. "What this young one says is true, and until we acknowledge this truth, Nakato's spirit will find no peace, and neither will our village." One by one, people began to stand. First, the children who had dreamed of Nakato and received her gifts. Then the workers who had fallen ill at the crossroads. Then Bwana Mutisa himself. "I believe," he said simply. "I have seen her with my own eyes, and I know she means us no harm. She wants only justice." By the end of the gathering, it was decided we would perform a proper burial ceremony for Nakato. We would clear her name and honor her as a healer, not condemn her as a witch. We would remember her true story and pass it down to our children. The final piece. We held the ceremony at dawn. As the sun's first rays touched the crossroads where Nakato had been buried, old Nantongo led the rituals, calling upon the ancestors to welcome Nakato among them at last. We removed the stones that had been meant to trap her spirit and replaced them with healing plants and flowers. We sang the songs reserved for respected elders and healers. We asked for her forgiveness and her blessing. As the ceremony reached its peak, I felt a familiar presence beside me. From the corner of my eye, I could see her Nakato in her white dress, watching us with those empty white eyes. But now, as I looked more directly, I saw that her eyes were changing, the whiteness receding to reveal warm brown irises beneath. A smile spread across her face, not sad this time, but peaceful. She nodded to me once, then seemed to dissolve into the morning mist. That night, for the first time in months, no one in the village saw the woman in white walking the streets. The white flowers began to wilt, their purpose fulfilled. Children slept peacefully, with no mysterious gifts beside their mats in the morning. But sometimes, when someone in our village falls ill, they report dreaming of a kind woman with warm brown eyes who shows them which herbs to use or how to make a healing poultice. And sometimes, healers like old Nantongo say they feel a guiding presence when they work, helping them find just the right remedy. We no longer fear Nakato's memory, we honor it. We have built a small shrine at the crossroads where travelers can leave offerings and ask for protection on their journeys. We tell her true story to our children, and if sometimes, on nights when the moon is full, people glimpse a woman in white walking along the forest edge, they do not run in fear. They bow their heads in respect to the healer who once lived among us, who died unjustly, and who walked our streets for 100 years, waiting for someone to finally hear her truth. So if you ever find yourself on the roads near Mabira village late at night, and you see a woman in a white dress walking ahead of you, do not be afraid. She means no harm to those who respect the truth. But remember her story, the story of Nakato, the healer who was wrongly condemned, who waited a century for justice, and who finally found peace. Because some stories don't end, even after death. Some truths refuse to stay buried, and sometimes it takes a ghost to teach the living the most important lesson of all. That justice delayed is not justice denied, even if it takes 100 years to arrive.